And what's going on, guys? Welcome to episode 33 of the Uncommon Line podcast. We are back here at Texas Gun Experience. What's going on, Mark?
Hey.
Our guest is in the shot, which we'll get to him in a second, but we got to do our intro. Welcome everybody to the show. Thank the people that we need to thank that are making this possible. First off, thank you to Texas Gun Experience. We're back up in the boardroom. I'm going to start calling it the boardroom. It just sounds cool. Back in the boardroom here at Texas.
Sorry, I had to sneeze, dude. Sorry, guys.
And welcome to episode 33. No, guys, we're back in the boardroom at Texas Gun Experience. We're so thankful they allow us to come back here each and every time we're here doing a show. They're so welcoming. I tell everybody this each and every time. If you're a company, if you're a person, if you're a civilian, if you exist in this world, come check out Texas Gun Experience in Grapevine, Texas, located on Main Street. If you're coming in, flying in a hotel, you got a little bit of a layover, you stop in at Texas Gun Experience, you check it out. Trust me, it's not just a gun range. It's not just a gun store. They've got a VIP lounge. They've got a training room. They've got this area. You can use any of this area for you or your company. You can use a boardroom to have a meeting. You can use the VIP lane, have an experience with, what do you call them, like retreats and stuff with your company.
Yeah.
And it's just a really cool place. Knives, guns, anything you can think of. Check it out. And probably they're one of the only stores in town right now with ammunition. So make sure you come check it out. Rent the minigun, rent the Gatling gun. Really cool place. Secondly, to our sponsor of this episode, we thank you. We talked about it in our last episode, Leatherwood Distillery. Thank you so much for joining the team. Andy and his team there in Tennessee. Guys, make sure you go check out Leatherwood Distillery. If you know us, if you live close by, stop by. We'll give you a sip. But trust us, they've got a bunch of different bottles you can try, a bunch of different stuff. Truly an awesome company. It's not just about the alcohol, which we love. It's about the camaraderie with Andy and his team. Former Special Forces, him and his interpreter started a business there. He's doing so much to give back to the veteran community. Plus, they're just badasses. So, anything else, Mark?
No.
All right, guys. So for today's episode, we've got a unique experience to kind of continue our leadership talk. Now more than ever, we need to talk and focus on leadership. And we've got somebody here that this is his forte. Besides dope, which we'll get into, he's done so much within the DEA community, all the way from being a frontline guy all the way up to what, number 2?
Number 3, senior career guy.
Senior career guy. So one of the top 3 guys. He's testified before Congress.
Yeah, before the Senate and the House. Yeah,
Senate and House. He's done it, and now he's got a company called Frontline Leadership. If you know anything about leadership, you know there's a lot of different companies out there that just give this. I don't know, what do you want to call it, Mark? This idea of leadership, right? Anybody can preach on leadership, but few people preach and teach on it from a level of experience, right? And have the experience. Some of them just do something once, and then all of a sudden they're leaders. And that's not necessarily how it is. So we wanted to sit down with somebody that's actually lived and done it. He's pretty much served in every single branch of the military.
Three military services.
Three military services. So we welcome James Capra to the show. It's not just about his DEA time. There's so much more to offer. So welcome to the Uncommon Line podcast.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having us, guys. I appreciate it. Really great.
So we've got your books here, which we'll get into in a little bit. I kind of mentioned to you beforehand something I wanted to talk about, right? Anybody can go. First off, you got to go check out his website, frontlineleadership.com, right?
Frontlineleadershipgroup.com, yeah.
Frontlineleadershipgroup.com. And you can see some of the stuff he's done on YouTube, right? And so you can hear how he spoke. And there's a lot out there. But one thing that's interesting is this approach on generational leadership and starting young, right? So teaching your kids and building up.
Yeah.
Right now, in the current climate we're in, I know we can't necessarily pinpoint one exact failure of leadership, but overall, if you had to diagnose where we're at, what is this failure? Like, what is the failure of leadership? Is it each person? Is it one organization? Like, what is this?
Well, it can be, so a couple of things. It can be individually. The reality of leadership is that, people move into positions. People are promoted for a couple of reasons. And let me just use the police world. So, this guy or gal is a phenomenal cop, phenomenal agent. They can, they do all sorts of great things. And then sometimes they say, okay, they're ready to lead. And that's not necessarily true. It's just not. And so we promote that person, and we realize that person thinks everybody's got to be like them because they could be a type 1 personality. And I think the other thing, the biggest thing that I've found in almost 40 years is that there is there is this misunderstanding of what leadership is about. You heard, leaders do the right thing, managers do things right, or whatever. It's just it's BS. The first and foremost thing is if you want to,
he's calling me out on my manager's comment.
If you want to walk into the leadership arena, the first thing you got to understand is there are men and women that you have to genuinely care for, and we don't. That's a soft skill. Even in, I actually think the military gets it better than law enforcement or from business practices. And for instance, I was talking to a couple of CEOs, and I was talking to them about, what's the bottom line. And actually this one CEO says to me, he said, Jimmy, the bottom line, you don't understand, it's quarterly, my money. I said, no, it's not. The bottom line is your men and women. And if you're able to develop relationships of trust with them, if they know you care about them, they will get you to the bottom line. They will get you to the market that you need to go. They will get you to the profits you want. And there are a lot of people who don't believe that. They believe, nope, that's not true. That, we're in a for-profit, so the bottom line is money. Well, if you want to make that money, you got to make sure those men and women, just like in this business here, are cared about. They're nurtured, they're developed, personally and professionally. That's a tough thing to get through some men and women.
So would you say that's foundational to society in general?
It's very foundational because we live in a me society. It's about me. I mean, all I got to do is sit 10 minutes on the television. It's like my wife would say all the time is, you deserve this. Most of the commercials, you deserve this. It's about me instead of, it's not. I tell people all the time, in the leadership arena, it's not about you. It's about others, and others come first. And that's a cycle that some leaders have broken or are able to move beyond that in terms of, I get it and I can move beyond it. But when I'm asked about failures in almost every, whether it's national security issues, dope issues, or personal in your people's personal lives, you see this a breakdown in trust. And that's the whole idea of developing relationships, of caring about people. So you get those men and women who trust you, they feel safe about coming to work. I don't mean security safe, like, oh, I'm going to be okay. I keep saying we, even though I've been retired since 2014, but we, in the warrior, arena, we're the guys and gals that keep everybody else safe. But your men and women want to feel safe, that they can come here, that they can express themselves, that they feel part of the team. It's not sterile, that's what I'm talking about. And it takes time to develop.
So something when I'm asking, like, is this foundational? Obviously we're living in I'm not, when I say this, me movement, like not hashtag me too, right? Like the me movement of like, it's me and nothing else. So you believe that this is foundational in its core of society nowadays, right? And do you believe this is the downfall of where we're at?
I think, honestly, every generation has been blamed for something by a previous generation, honest to God. If we go back to the World War I generation, they probably blamed the generation before them. But really, when you look at the World War II generation, and then you looked at, the Korean War, Vietnam generation, everybody's always pointing towards these people today. In the 80s, it was, it was all about self, and you can find a lot of things wrong culturally in every generation. But there's a couple of things I think that's been happening in our country for the last 25 years. We're losing sight. We don't talk to people, men and women, about the pursuit of purpose. The family unit is being broken up, which is the number one problem that we have today. I don't care what anybody says. In crime and everything else, you come down, anybody's walked the street, worn a badge, can tell you what we have is a broken family situation. That broken family situation bleeds over to your work situation, bleeds over to other things. So when you talk about basic foundational things about what it takes to develop trust in your family, develop trust in your work. And I used to say, when I would see a very, very poor leader at work, and what I mean by that, an arrogant, egotistical man or woman, I would say, I wonder how they
give us a name.
I wonder how they treat their family.
You've been retired for a little bit. We can start using that.
I wonder how they treat their family. And I'd be willing to bet it's the same, it's the same way. And I've seen it from guys that I know, not necessarily friends, but watch how they come in, they think they float on a cloud. And I used to tell people all the time, people get promoted sometimes and they think suddenly that they're taller, faster, and better looking than everybody else. Instead of realizing, hey, this is part of the pursuit of my purpose, what value am I going to add?
Well, that's something that's always bothered me about, and obviously we're talking a lot, guys, on law enforcement, right? Because it's our careers. I mean, so it's easy to relate that. But what do I tell everybody on this, on these episodes is, even though sometimes we're talking about law enforcement, you still have so much to learn for generalities, business, stuff like that. But something that's interesting when you bring up on that is something that drives me nuts about people that promote sometimes is they lose themselves. It's like they got to be a different person when they promote, and it just blows my mind. Look, you've been in a supervision level way high above, in the highest ranks of our government. You got to do the dance sometimes, right? But did you ever have to change who you were?
No, I never did. Well, that was the difference. That's I promised myself years ago. A lot of my walk has to do with how I was raised, and the majority of it also has to do with the faith that I carry with me. Fallible guy. Got plenty of. I tell people I'm held together by duct tape and twine, but those are things that. I never want to compromise. I don't want to compromise. So, but you always learn though. You kind of learn when you promote, one of the first things that happens, you think I got to be smarter than everybody else. Oh my God, what if I don't have the answer? Well, you don't. And once you realize that, you suddenly become more comfortable. It's okay. It's okay that, Johnny or Susie, I take a dope crew. I went to, my first supervisor position was in Newark, New Jersey, had this amazing group of individuals. And one of the first things I found out within the first month is there was a cat there. His name is Pat Flood. I don't know if Pat's still retired, but he could look at phone tolls and figure out who was in charge and who wasn't.
Oh, that's a gifted person right there.
How do you do that? How the heck do you do that? And so you realize another guy was a money laundering guy. And I never liked money laundering. Never, because it has to do with math. I can't do math. And so you find these men and women who are like incredible. You're so thankful that they're part of it, Now, so the other thing is when somebody didn't know how to do something, you say, let's find somebody who does. Now listen, I would tell people all the time, I had to be competent in being an agent and the job and knowing how to do investigations and stuff. But you're not the end all, and that's okay. And what you just said is people lose themselves because they BS. They go, or somebody comes, put it this way, somebody comes in and says, hey boss, I'm not sure how to do that. And a boss sometimes who's not sure himself, he'll go, look it up in a manual, right? Look it up in a manual.
Yeah.
Instead of going, you know what? I can't tell you a couple times. Hey, you know what? I've never had to do that. Let's find somebody who does, and you go from there. And so, and then there are people who say, well, when you do that, people start to think that, people realize that you're a human being and they appreciate your honesty, So that's this. You're not somebody else. You're not. You're designed to be you, to use the talents and the gifts you have. And even, I tell people all the time, even the shortcomings, you try to be aware of those. And if you can correct them, you correct them.
Mark, anything on that? It's been 13 minutes. You haven't said anything. Do you have anything on that?
No, the question, I've got a question, but the time hasn't come up for it just yet.
Okay, well then hold on for that. Then.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've got one. Because I think it's a two-street question. All right. But it's not, we're not there yet. The conversation hasn't led to there.
So let me go back to something that you said earlier, because your podcast is you have probably a lot of military and law enforcement that are listening to it. But these leadership principles, like people would ask me from time to time, when I go out and speak, I do it to a lot of law enforcement communities. I do it to businesses. But they say, well, is everything has to do with police leadership? I go, no, it just has to do with leadership. And what does that mean? And if you Google leadership, you just Google it, there's 50 million hits.
Yeah.
So it must be pretty important. And so people say, well, leadership in law enforcement is different than leadership. And I made this comment. I probably shouldn't have, a number of years ago. I had a lieutenant series. There was a lieutenant series I was doing at the Caruth Police Institute. And I said, listen, whether you're leading men and women in a precinct or a command, or you're leading men and women in a donut factory, you got to use the same things. And about half of the class looked at me like I was freaking nuts. Like, hey,
this fucking asshole.
You had to use donuts? But I said, listen, the principle is the same. You have a purpose. Do you know? And that's what you get back to is, how do you start? You have a purpose. Do your men and women know what you expect of them? They know what your department expects of them. I would tell people all the time, the majority of our men and women, think about your own walks. The majority of men and women that you run into, they know their job.
Yeah.
Really, they just, the difference is some of those men and women are on different rungs of the ladder in regards to some men and women. If they worked for the Antichrist, you couldn't stop them from being good. Some men and women, and this is true, a lot of people are just, they're happy being mediocre. And mediocrity is the absolute enemy of excellence.
Yeah.
But we see those every day. You know, and we see it in leadership, the same thing. I'm to come to work and do my thing. You know, DEA, we used to say, no cases, no headaches, small cases, small headaches, big cases, big headaches. And it's the same thing kind of in leadership. When you step into that arena, you got to be willing to go, okay, let's move forward. Let's get these men and women to go in that direction. That's what I used to say. Wherever I'm important, that's north, and we're going, and you're all coming with me, you know, type of deal. And it's not always lead from the, you see all this BS on Facebook and lead from the front. You got to be this. No, you got to, you're men and women. The most critical thing is develop relationships, get to know them personally and professionally, and have, you know, try to develop them personally and professionally. And there's a lot of people, well, sometimes we use adjectives that are not really correct. I've run into people who have no interest in that. Like, when you leave work, I don't care about what you do.
Yeah.
You're wrong.
Well, let me ask you this. There's a couple things there that I want to hit on. So the first thing you talk about, there's 5 million fucking things on leadership out there.
There are.
There are guys that have legitly led people, you know, that are legit good leaders. And they think it's got to be, and not everybody, but sometimes there's got to be an equation. You know, like this word plus this thing equals success, you know, like the stupid science posters you used to see in the police academies and everything. There's this equation. Something I've noticed with your leadership style and the stuff you write in your books is it's very basic. And it's like, but it's, I'm not shaming it on that. I'm not trying to belittle that, but it's good because to me, you dumb it down on it's your people, right? So people try to equate that to something. And they want to give it this weird or these crazy words. Well, really, it's just care for people. What is your why?
Yeah, well, that's a good thing because there's a book. What is your why? And but getting back to what you said is it's absolutely true. It is. There are no ABCs. There's no step 1, step 2, step 3. And there's a lot of books that say that. Here are the 3 most important things.
Yes.
Here are the ABCs to becoming a great leader. Let me push it back further. Here's the best way to become, you know, a husband. Here's the best way to become a wife. Here's the best way to raise children. If you follow these steps, that's BS. In order to understand how to truly lead men and women, you have to be in the arena. You have to be a practitioner, not a theoretician. You have to be willing to shed some tears, you know, suffer some pain, make some mistakes, get up off the ground, be willing to go to your men and women sometimes and go, I screwed that thing up. I'm sorry. And that's a hard thing for guys and gals, not just in our profession, but in a lot of professions. You know, boss screws up. Now, if you're going and telling your guys every day, gals, hey, I'm sorry, I messed that up. You're in the wrong seat.
Right.
But there's nothing wrong with that. Well, we can't.
There's a time and place for it.
There's so many misperceptions about stuff, about friendship. You know, there's a big thing about familiarity breeds contempt. Familiarity breeds contempt. Familiarity breeds contempt. I'm like, what? Well, if they get to know you, you know, they're going to listen. Men and women who care about not only their leader, leaders that care about them, they develop that relationship. They're not going to do that. Somebody's gonna.
Yeah.
Let me put it this way: you can be the best boss now. You can develop the greatest relationships. You got to have a team that is moving and grooving, but there's always that one guy, that one gal that no matter how much you pour into them, and I use like a bucket. So I think not a bucket, but like a spout, like a flower thing. And I always say metaphorically, you're pouring into them all that good stuff. You know, in order for plants to go, you got to put water on them so it'll grow. So you can be pouring into this person all day long, and all of a sudden you walk away and you hear something leaking, and all that stuff is leaking out of their ass. And you go, they don't get it. Or do the same thing, and that same person will climb up on their desk, drop their pants, and crap on you. That's what I call the baggage factor. That's that's going to happen.
Well, we were talking about it last episode. Like, no matter what, because one of the questions was, you know, like about agencies and switching agencies. Grass isn't always greener on the other side. But something to consider in that aspect is, like, there's always going to be that dude in the agency that's just fucking pissed off. That just sucks. Isn't a good cop. It's just lazy. There's nothing you can do about it. No matter what type of leader you have, he's just always going to hate it, right?
So it's absolutely, it's true. It's because it's a person. This, that, and then you ask yourself, why are you here?
Yeah.
What the hell? Why, we have them, and you have to, as a leadership, you still have to deal with that. And people say, how do you deal with it? I said, I'll tell you how I deal with it. As long he's doing his job, he's doing this, that, and the other thing, but I don't waste any more of my energy pouring into that person. And anybody who tells you, hey, you can fix a guy like that, that's bullshit. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Because you're not called as a leader to fix anybody. That is not your job, is to fix somebody. Your job is to lead, or in a leadership position, is to lead men and women to pursue your mission and to accomplish your mission, or what that goal is, or what your corporation is. That's your job, to get to, what is it that we're supposed to do? And you said a good thing earlier. It's funny because when I talk to executives, I said, one of the first things I put up there is, why are you here? People look around and go, oh God, this guy's going to start, putting dandelions in his. I said, I'm serious. Have you ever considered, why are you here? Why are you in this position right now? And for me, I'd say, why did the good Lord put you here? But you have this opportunity to do. Have you ever really considered why you're here? Because that starts with, hey, why am I here? Is this about me? Is this about my department? Is this about my corporation? You start getting men and women to start thinking like that. Now that sounds philosophical, but it's true. You start with, why am I here?
Yeah.
What's my person? That's why I said you get back to when I was young, my dad was an old-time New York City cop. And as we got older, he would say, my father had a 10th grade education, we think Korean combat veteran, went off to war, came home in one piece, married his sweetheart, had 7 kids, and got hurt on the job, broke his back and neck on patrol. But as we're growing up, as we got into teenage years, I barely got out of high school. I don't care. And people laugh. They say, well, you got a couple of degrees. I go, yeah. If I have any teachers that are alive, and I doubt if they are, if they saw I have a couple of degrees, they'd lie. Say, he got that from the internet. He didn't get that. But my father would always say, you have to find, your purpose, what you're made for. And of course, he'd go back to our faith. He goes, what's God putting in your heart that he's pulling you towards? That's what it is. What is it? What is that? What is it pulling you? Not a test that goes, well, I guess I'm good at handwriting. I'll become a, what is that desire in your heart? What is your purpose? And sometimes it's difficult to really establish and find. And even in leadership, you got to pursue your purpose as a leader, pursue your purpose as an employee, pursue your purpose as a father, as a mother. Pursue that purpose. Be an example for other people to follow. That's why I have lost all sorts of respect for the majority of, professional sports. And I'm not an example. Okay, fine. Don't be an example. Then shut up.
Yeah, shut up and play the
Don't
sport.
get on your freaking, don't start saying, you don't start chiming in on, situations that are going on around the world. But, what is your purpose that you want to pursue? Why were you made? Why are you here? And, people get a little, what? Start there, man.
Yeah. And
then, like I said, that's what I would talk about with the men and women that I had the opportunity to serve with. Why you're here and care about them. Let me put it this way. And I have my wife would always say, you have a lot of words. One of the neatest things after I retired, and I loved my job. I retired as a chief of global operations. I absolutely loved every job I had. Been blessed beyond measure. We picked up our family. I think since my wife and I are married, and we've been together now 40 years, we moved about 13 times. Some of that's military, some of that's DEA, some of that's on our own. When I retired, I have a box of stuff. I got emails from all around the world, from people I don't even know. And the majority of those emails went like this. This is why I'm talking about when you develop relationships of trust, you care about people, and I tell them you fall in love with people. And people go, oh my God, he's talking about love. Love is a conscious act of the will. Love means, you know what? I may not agree with you politically. I may not agree with your faith. I may not agree with your lifestyle, but damn well, I'm going to care about you as a person. You belong to us in here, then we're going to care about you. We're going to make sure that you're nurtured. We're going to make sure that you're developed if you want to be developed personally and professionally. I'm going to pour into stuff. So I get into people's lives. One of the neatest box of things that I get is, and every now, I was on a podcast not long ago. I started freaking getting choked up about it, so I'll try not to. But this is how it would start. Hey, boss, I don't know if you remember me, but I remember when my baby was sick that you called up and said, don't worry about A, B, and C. Hey, boss, I don't know if you remember me. He goes, But I remember when my mom died that you called and said, hey, boss, I remember when my wife was diagnosed with cancer. I'll never forget it. I'll never forget you. Never forget what you said. What you said. Nobody said, hey, boss, your training was so good that they're making a statue of me on I-95 because I seized 1,000 kilos. You know what I mean? You know what they said? So at the end, I would do this in every tour. I would sit and I pray. And again, I am a fallible, scarred up dude. But when I'd start someplace, I said, Lord, let me make a little bit of a difference. Let me make it a little bit better than what was given to me. Not a lot, not looking, just a little bit in men and women's lives. And so how do you measure that? You really never. My wife would say, you don't know the lives that you impact. So even though we're in this career, even though our mission is to, is to take bad guys off the street, and I would tell people all the time, we have this huge strategic plan. If you're constipated, read it. It'll help you. But I would tell guys all the time, we take dope off the street and put bad people in jail. That's what we do. But at the end of the day, it's those men and women who get you there. You got to care about them. You got to learn to love them, and not just here, not just Simon Sinek. Everybody raves about Simon Sinek. Simon Sinek's stealing all my crap. I tell people he's still my Simon Sinek's he's never led or managed anybody. But he's making millions of dollars telling people how to be a leader. Now, people say, you sound like a jealous. I said, I am. I am jealous. So, but Sinek did a piece on about the military, and he shared how much these guys, he used one particular instance where a guy was wounded, and his captain carried him on the Black Hawk, and captain had to get back off, but kissed the guy and left. He goes, what drives somebody to do that? I said, love drives somebody to do it. There's different kinds of love. There's romantic love, but I'm talking about you care about these men and women. You care what happens to them. You care about their families. You care about them as the purpose. That changes a culture.
Yeah.
That you want to know how to. You start with those relationships, and you slowly start to change the climate, right? And then the next thing you know, you wake up and your culture has changed, and that drives people to say, I want to be here, I want to be part of this thing.
So let me ask you this: where does leadership start?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because a lot of guys and gals, when you first start out anywhere, you don't want to lead. You want to learn your job first. But I think it's a heart thing. I tell people all the time, it's not a head thing. You can go get it, man. You can get a master's degree, you can get a doctorate in leadership and everything. But it's a heart thing, not a head thing. It's that willingness to care about it. And where does this start? It starts individually. I got interviewed one time. They said, is leadership a personal thing? I went, yeah. Yeah, it's a personal thing. It's a very personal thing. Because you got to consider what my actions are going to have an impact on these men and women. If it's two, or like for me, we had 10, I have 10,000 people you're supposedly responsible for. I didn't know all 10,000 people. Of course not. But it starts with the person, that particular person. And what are you going to leave? Here's the other thing. In the course of my career, I've watched other bad leaders, and then I find out who their leader was. And he was another freaking crap bird. He's modeled himself after somebody who thinks he's doing it right. What the hell's wrong with you?
Yeah.
It is really, and I tell people all the time, it is not like parenting. I heard an individual talk about her division, this person was especially in charge of. These are my kids. I went, oh my God in heaven. They are not your kids. They are your friggin' warriors. These are the people that should stand up. They should fight over each other if something happens. That's not what, these are men and women with mortgages and family issues and problems and, all sorts of stuff. Listen, you move into that position. I can tell you so many times you walk into my office and somebody will walk in, especially one of my ASACs, and say, hey, so-and-so's wife just walked out on him. All the kilos in the world don't matter, right? Hey, can you see, Joan? Yeah, Joan, come on in. She's sitting in front of my desk. I come out from behind the desk. I said, what? My kid was just diagnosed with leukemia. What the hell matters then? You still got to do your mission, right? But in that moment, in that singular moment, the whole world is coming apart. What are you going to do? And I tell people sometimes the only thing you can do, and we've done this, I've done this. Sometimes the only can do at a funeral or an event like that is you wind up putting your arms around somebody and you cry with them. That's not corny, man. That's not, oh, like, hang on, let me find this. This is in the Yale Book of Leadership. That's not in there, dude. I can't bring the kid back. I can't make the marriage whole again. But what can I do to mitigate? I said, well, how can I help you? I had a guy who was a full bird colonel in the Marines. Terrific agent. He's deployed so many times. And so when I took over the division, I hardly saw him. Heard nothing but great things about him. He was gone probably a year and a half or so. And when he came back, I saw him in the hall. And I have to be honest with you, as soon as I saw him and he talked, I said, there's something not right with him. I don't have any voodoo magic here. I've just said there's something, it's just that. So one of my ASECs at the time said, hey, I'm worried about so-and-so. We're kind of worried about the guy. So I went down. He's an agent. So I go down to his desk. I said, hey, you got a minute? He said, yeah. I said, how are you doing? And he loses it. Starts weeping. This guy has been in more combat than anybody should be ever allowed to be in. He starts sharing with me that he's treating his family like they're a friggin' Marine unit and blah, I'm losing it. He says, I'm starting to lose my family and everything. That's what I'm talking about. People said, what did you say? I said, you don't work. You work directly for me now. This is what I need you to do. And then at the time, we also had, we had a real great chaplains program in the division. And so I utilized our chaplain. By the way, when people, oh, what happens if it's a Mormon or something? Most chaplains can get you who you need. You need a medicine man from Oklahoma. He can get you that. And I'm not trying to be funny. Real cognizant of people's faith and stuff, regardless of what I believe. But we got him that. We got him off the street, and we tried to get him help. Now, here's the thing. Here's what you got to understand as a leader. Did we save his family? Did he save his? He still wind up getting a divorce, but that happens. That's what I mean. There's no Disney ending all the time, and that's what people, great leaders. You can do this. No, this is life, man.
Yeah, well, and Disney sucks.
Yeah. So
I fucking hate Disney.
Anyway, I got a lot of words. What you got, man?
All right, Mark, come on.
No, that was good. I want to go back to something that you said about Simon Sinek. How important is credibility in your leadership walk?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, man. And that's why I joke and I say there's tons of stuff that are written on leadership. And the reality is the first thing I do is I'll go to the back of a book and go, who is this guy? And that's why I joke about Simon. He's got some good stuff, don't get me wrong. And I'm not here to beat up Simon Sinek, but there are men and women. There's 25-year-old kids out there that are freaking running around because they're good, they're funny, and they're going to corporate events to tell other CEOs how to run their organization.
There's fucking people on Instagram that have literally done nothing that are doing leaders.
So now, do I blame them? Guys getting paid and everything else, God bless them. What I blame is the company that's bringing them in and go, what's their credibility? And Mark, you're exactly right. What's their credibility? And like I tell people is, I want to hear from practitioners. I'll give you a classic example. When I just came on the job in DEA, went to the firearms range, and I thought everybody on the range, the range instructors were DEA agents, and they weren't. One guy was a guy from a firearms company, and a phenomenal instructor, just a great instructor and everything, because I couldn't shoot. I mean, in the military I shot machine guns. Growing up, I had shotguns, but DEA taught me how to shoot a handgun. But I remember one time the guy started saying, well, here's what happens in a firefight. And I'm like, oh, man, he's talking about this, and this is going to happen, and that's going to happen. And I find out this guy's not even a cop. He's never been in a firefight. He shoots at freaking targets that don't shoot back at him. And you're going to tell me what happens at a firefight? No, you have no credibility. Go away. He's a good instructor. He was a good instructor. But don't tell me what happens in a crisis situation versus the man or woman who goes, let me walk you through my experience. And it ain't perfect, Like the team I was with years ago, a great group of guys, and we did a huge operation. And the guy at a house opened up with an AK-47 and everything. And I remember talking to one of the guys from LAPD, and we used to call him Jurassic Narc. He's a wonderful man and everything. I said, brother, how you doing? I raced out there. SWAT had to go out and everything. This is my operation. And he goes, buddy, everything's fine. He goes, I pooped my pants a little bit, but everything is fine. That's, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's not that TV crap. Yeah. He goes, but I got a little peanut butter in my drawers. He goes, but we're all alive. And I'm just using that because, it's not this kind of, get back to what you said earlier, the ABCs, the 1, 2, 3. No, but you got to walk.
It's not static.
By the way, no, it's not. And the other thing is, you got to always be willing to learn because you never get there. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. All of a sudden you become self-actualized. You become a great leader. No, you're always learning. You always should be looking at somebody and go, "Damn, that's good, man." Or, "Hey, I don't want to do that." It's easy. It's easy to figure out what a bad leader is. What we do, think about it. Think about some of the good leaders in your life, personal, professional. And we take them for granted because we go, I don't know how they did that, but I love working for them. So sometimes we take it for granted, and we go, man, I should be learning that. A bad leader, right away. He's a butthead. He's ego. He's this. He's that.
Half the time they walk in the room, and you're like, this motherfucker.
Yeah. Listen, you got a problem when your guys are happier when you're gone than when you're there. There's something different when you go, oh man, the boss is off today. That sucks. Which is rare.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. Obviously, to me, and just from the outside looking in, if you're not failing, like you're going to fail at some point, right? And so as failing as a leader obviously is different than failing as a frontline guy in some aspects of it, right? Because you're a leader. And so many people think in this ideology, you shouldn't fail, you're a leader, right? So what did you ever do to take your failures to learn from them so it didn't roll downhill, so to speak?
Yeah.
Because I think so many times a poor leader, my idea of a manager, their failures then roll downhill to them and they never take blame for their failures, right? And so using the failures you had,
right.
if you had any.
I was perfect. I should have the statue on I-95.
Taking those and then making sure that doesn't impact your frontline guys.
Right. Well, that's why.
The reason I ask this is because I think right now what we're seeing across the nation, whether it be government, law enforcement things, is I think some of the failures on the top end, truly the failures on the top end, are rolling downhill to the frontline guys, and that's why we're seeing so many ill effects.
Well, yeah, you do that, and there is. I want to be careful how I pass. There's also a level of cowardice might be too strong. Cowardice out there by some leaders. We live in a volatile time right now. We live in a time where the media can have you fired for saying something that's not so bad or anything. And so, one of the guy who wrote Good to Great, Jim Collins.
Mark, everybody we have on the show reads so many things.
Yes. So I do. So Jim Collins he's a researcher. That's what I love about Collins. And Collins was one of the first few books that I used to try to
I'm pretty sure he did the music soundtrack for Tarzan.
Yeah, that Collins.
Yeah, somebody who hates Disney quoting fucking.
But Collins, Collins did this. He said he talked to a group. They were around a corporate table, and the CEO came up with a great idea, supposedly a great idea. It was a horrible idea, and each person he wanted to know from each person what they thought. For each person what they thought. And this one guy who was interviewed said, I was ready. I was going to say, you're out of your freaking mind. But everybody said yes. And all he thought of, I'm going to lose my job. So I'm just going to say it's okay. That's failure. So who's the failure there? So those men and women were so afraid that they would sacrifice their corporation by going, dude, you're going down a wrong street. So you got to be willing to learn from that. I used to tell guys when I was fortunate when I got to Dallas to run Dallas. I knew all the leaders in there, the men and women who were my mid-level leaders, just guys and gals that were just outstanding in their own right. But I remember meeting with them and saying, "Listen, if you all agree with me, now they know me, and some of them were my friends. But if you all, I had to let them know, if you all agree with everything I'm doing, one of us isn't needed." And if I'm driving the ship over the waterfalls and you don't say anything, That's on you, man. And so when it came down to going back to failure, right? How do you prevent it? How do you mitigate? You can never prevent all failure.
Right. That's what I mean. It's
you
inevitable.
Just can't. It's going to happen. It's okay. What do I do when failure happens? We can't fail tactically because people get killed. We got to mitigate what we do on the street as far as, staying abreast of the ops plan, making sure we do everything right. A, B, C, D, F, G. It happens. But I'll give you a class. The easiest thing is to look at yourself and say, okay, let me talk about two different things that I learned. It stuck with me. I tried, one of the biggest things they tell you that you really need to perfect is listening, right? Now, I have a lot of words. And sometimes if you and I are talking, I'm starting to think about what I'm going to say. You're still telling me something and I'm not paying attention. So I have an ASAC, an assistant special agent in charge. He's sitting in front of me. Forget it. And he's going on and on and on. He's talking about this thing that he wants to do in his district office. And he's going on and on. And I'm already formulating a plan in my head. He talks for another 3 minutes. And right about when I get ready to say, hey, I realize I haven't heard the rest of it. This is absolutely true story. I haven't heard the rest of what he said. And I stopped and I said, Jimmy, I said, can you tell me that again? He's been talking for 8 minutes, 9 minutes. I said, can you talk to me, Ben? I said, because Jimmy goes, I said, I've been so consumed with responding to that I didn't hear the last 3 minutes. Of course, he looked at me like I was freaking nuts and going, what the hell do I have here? Did one thing. So talk about, did one thing for me. That taught me a huge lesson, but I still struggle with that. Which can lead to failure. And another example is that same guy on the phone was calling me because he was having a tough time with a local PD that didn't want to do the controlled delivery like we wanted to do, and I lost my crap over the phone, and I'm screaming into the phone, right? That's not usually my MO, but I'm screaming into the phone going, I'm not mad at him, I'm mad at the situation, right? I'm screaming into the phone, the God, this, that, and the other thing. Now, in my front office, I have these women who are assistants in the front office. They've never heard that come out of my mouth. Never. And I hang up the phone and I melted the phone on his hand. And they sat at my desk and go, you're an ass. So now what do? I'm going to let it go and just say, look how tough I am. I was angry and everybody should know that. That's stupid. I embarrassed myself in front of these guys. I melted the phone with my ASAC. What's he going to do with his crew, by the way? I just finished screaming at it. What's he going to do? He's going to turn right around and do the same thing with his crew. So I had to call him up right away and say, hey, dude, I'm sorry. Don't take it on. But I friggin' then I had to go to the ladies and say, I really apologize for what you're, I'm sorry about that. Those are those little failures if you don't correct right away. But you can't, regardless of what it is, you can't fall down and go, oh, you got to learn from it. Hopefully, it teaches you. I still have a problem with it. My wife's great about it because you have a lot of words. Give them time to speak. Give somebody time to say something. I still do. So, but failure is never, and it sounds corny, it's not final. The only time it's final is when you're dead. That's it. But it's not final. It never is final. I lost my business. It ain't final. This is, you lost a loved one. You lost something. It's not final. I lost my business. I lost my position. It's not final.
So obviously you're doing a lot with leadership now in your company now after retirement. When did it kind of click for you, and why this business after the fact?
That's it's funny because in the position I had, a lot of guys who were senior executives, they left and they got some pretty significant jobs and stuff. And I just, a year before I retired, we were on our way to a good friend of mine's, his son's wedding, was a Marine. And on the way up there, I was, my wife and I were talking and she said, I said, I think I'm going to go in a year. I think we're going to do it. And she said, listen, you've always wanted to write a book. Why don't you write a book? And I had stacks and stacks of paper done. It was all over the place. But go back a few years before that. He said, when it clicked for me, what I wanted to do when I retired, I really didn't really want to be a security guy at the time. what I really want to do is years early, I have a good friend of mine. His name is Bill Fay. Bill Fay happens to be an evangelist. Bill was a felon 40 years ago, and or more. And Bill runs around the country speaking at churches and everything. And I became a close friend of his. He was a chaplain in DEA, Colorado. And so when I was in Miami, he stopped by the office and we were talking. He goes, "Let me ask you something." He goes, "What keeps you awake at night?" And I'm like, What? He goes, what keeps you awake? I goes, "I don't mean your health, your children." He goes, when you think about you, and I said, "What keeps me awake at night?" I says, when I retire, I want to write and I want to speak. I want to talk to things about leading men and women. I want to talk to them the importance of caring about people. And he said, I'll never forget it. He says, again, he says, that's not just on you. He says, he believes that God puts that in your heart to do that. We think for some reason, he says, he says, I believe that. I said, but God's put that in your heart. And so it's always what I wanted to do. And then a couple of years later, my wife says, "Hey," or not even a year, she says, "Why don't you write a book?" And, the next thing you know, I just said, "Okay, I'm going to commit." And I call it stepping out of the boat, because you're going to get a retirement, but we still had bills to pay. We still had, kids, a few kids not married yet. Some were finished in college and everything else. But we said, "Okay, I think we can do this." And so that's it. And when it clicked for me as far as leadership is really early, even as a
Was
senior
it a need
agent.
you saw?
It's a good point. It goes back to what I said about being personal. I would see bad leaders and go, "What is wrong with you?" But then I'd see really humble, good leaders, and they weren't senior executives. They were just men and women who people.
Well, that's why I asked you, like, where does it start? Because I have the thought process of, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that leadership can start from the second you step in the academy. Leadership can start the second you step into work at this company.
Yeah.
In an aspect.
Without knowing that, hey, someday I'm going to be some leader. But I would call that informal leadership. Like some of the best leaders I had in the division, other than my staff, were some of these senior men and women. They don't want to. You don't need stripes to be a leader. You don't need stars to be a leader. It's that's positional.
Right.
That's really positional, and there's all sorts of fancy words for that. But they call them these informal leaders. I got told when I got to the division that this guy is anti-leadership. This guy, but a good buddy of mine said, "Hey, if you get a chance to meet so and so," he said, "He's a crime fighter." That's what you call me. He's a crime fighter, which meant this guy's a great guy. But a couple other people who were in mid-level management said the guy's anti-management. I get to know the guy. He's a senior agent. That's all. It's a senior agent. Get to go know the guy. He's got one of the most genuine, caring hearts I've ever seen. We had a couple of tragedies at the division, not from the street, but personal tragedies. First guy there. Wealth of knowledge. And I started leaning on him. So if I lost a supervisor in a group, I'd go up to him and say, "Hey, brother, can you do me a favor? Can you run that group for a while?" And I fell in love with the guy. He wasn't anti-management. He was not afraid to speak up if something was wrong. So if you were a boss and you were whatever it was, it wasn't being insubordinate. But if he thought what you were saying or doing or something was wrong, he would say something.
So what are your thoughts on that?
I think that's terrific. You got to know how to do that. For instance, you still got to be respectful about it, and but your men and women should feel comfortable enough to do that. Now, there's always somebody who's going to go, "I disagree with you." There's always somebody who's going to go, "You're the boss and I hate you."
Which it could be the right decision, and they still disagree.
Right. Exactly. And that happens a lot. But this gets back to relationships. You want people. You don't want to be afraid of that. You have to be comfortable enough in your skin as a leader to go, "I'm good with that." Now, if he's going to go, "Listen, you SOB." No, I will. I made an art out of being able to remove your head and pat you on the back on the way out. So that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about accountability. But if somebody goes, "Hey, can I talk to you about, you're going to move this group here, or you're going to move this person from my group over here, and I think that's a bad call and everything." You got to be comfortable with your own skin. Say, I respect that, but we're going in that way. And the conversation is basically going to be, over. But I'm not going to be offended by that. I'm not going to be, that's not going to bother me. Classic example, again, something that I wrote in the book. This supervisor up in Oklahoma, I was talking to him and he was telling me about a major disagreement he had on the street with an agent. And I'm like, I'm starting to do a twitch. But he said something that was so mature, and he'd only been a supervisor for a short period of time. But he said, you know what, boss? He had the right to disagree with me because he had the time and the experience, and he had the right to disagree with me. That, you know what kind of level of maturity that takes to say that? When one of you guys is, he's vehemently disagreeing. How should I? At the end of the day, they went with what the supervisor said they were going to do. And by the way, it was the right call anyway. It wasn't tactically bad. It was just, hey, I think we should do A, B, and C. But he said, this guy was a senior guy, was mature enough, and he had every right to disagree with me. And I sat there and go, this is one of the most mature things a young supervisor could see. But he didn't get mulled over. The guy wasn't disrespectful.
But we see so much of the mowed over and humility, right? Like, that's got to be humility on the upper side of leadership. So with that being said, then we have the hierarchy of leadership, right? Yeah. We come from paramilitary.
It is chain of command is important. I am critical chain of command guy.
So, but at times it's very linear, right?
Can be, yeah.
Do you think we have too much of a hierarchy approach in so many facets of America today that we're not allowing the linear approach of leadership to be self-evident?
I know what you're saying. So the only way I can tell you is example-wise. Go back to what I said earlier. You want men and women. There is a thing about, do you feel safe in your area of work? Not safe from bad guys or anything, or safe that somebody's going to shoot somebody at work. Do you feel comfortable and safe enough to say, can I bring this up to the boss and still use the chain of command? And so I would encourage that. Like, I'd go to admin. There's so much paper. In the federal system, there's so much. There's paperwork to support. That's why when you hear people say, don't make a federal case out of it, it's because we've got freaking paperwork for everything. and it is redundant. It is absolutely redundant.
Same paperwork for same thing.
It's ridiculous. It's redundant, but it's in the system. And so I'd go to admin and say, get these admin people, these administrative people, not just the leaders, the guys and gals that are sitting there, doing vouchers and doing this, ordering. I said, if you see a different way for us to do things, you need to let us know, because you're part of it. You're going to be part of this thing. You have to let us know. That takes a cultural change, a climate change. People are not used to that. That's like when people say, I have an open door policy. Any of you can walk in my office. That's bullshit. I go, I have a policy that if you want to come and see me, you run it up through the chain of command and I will see you. But if we get to know, like that idiot who always disagrees with everybody, I want to talk to the boss about me not getting a bonus. No. That ain't happening.
Get the fuck out of here.
Get out of here. You know what I mean? So there's this balance out there that's like, hey, ABs, you don't get, at the end of the day, we're going to make a decision that says we're going in that direction, and you want your men and women, okay, let's go. When we were in academy, we were taught all the time, if you see something wrong with an operation, you need to raise your hand and say, hey, there's something wrong with there. But most people, when you first start out, say, I ain't saying shit.
Right, but we're building a culture that's okay with not raising awareness for that's danger, right?
So it gets back to leadership, right? It gets back to, what are we training our men and women? What do we really want them to do? For instance,
pull your mic up just a tad.
So what do we want them to do? Do we want them to be like, I don't want a brand new kid who's a GS7 when I put out a SOP on social media saying, I'd like to talk to you about that. I don't think you're wrong on a couple of situations, because he would be riding his ass out the door, right? That's not what I'm talking about, right? This is
nothing.
Yeah, this is not what I'm talking about. But you want these men and women that we have are, for the most part, are good, strong, vibrant, smart men and women, and we should not be afraid to leverage that to help us get to where we go.
So how do you balance the empowerment versus still maintaining the leadership?
Well, that's why chain of command is important. When young men and women have ideas, and that's why it was incumbent on me to tell my ASACs and then my supervisors, your guys and gals have ideas about how we can do things better.
Let's say I think it's the same
thing. Listen, I think it's the same thing when you have workers saying, hey, they have to feel empowered that they can go to the boss. At the end of the day, this is the CEO's business. At the end of the day, this is, as the special agent in charge, he's the CEO. At the end of the day, he's going to go, we're going in this direction. But do your men and women feel comfortable enough to say, hey, I got to, I think I have a better mousetrap. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think I have a better mouse. Why not? Why wouldn't we entertain something like that? But you have to temper it with wisdom, because people come with baggage, and you gotta, people will try to, take advantage of things. Some people will, not all people. But once men and women, that's why I said it gets this relationship, this trust relation. Once they realize, hey, this is an okay, I can do this. I can't tell you the number of times that up through the chain somebody said, it took a few years. I was running Dallas for 6.5 years. I think I was one of the longest sitting sacks there. And you get to know these men and women. It's just terrific.
Yeah.
Terrific. And we listen, we had a job to do. At the end of the day, bad guys got to go to jail. Dope's got to be taken off the street. We don't lose sight of that. Like, in other words, I don't lose sight of, well, I'm going to have a relationship with you, and it's okay that you're a dipshit. No, that's not what I'm talking about. It ain't happening.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's not. So the pursuit is for everybody. I call it the pursuit of excellence. I used to tell people, pursuit of excellence at work, pursuit of excellence at home. What does that look like? And it's not about it's not about I want to win. It's not about I want to be successful, because you can cheat and be successful. People cheat all the time. Look at some of the famous, the Tour de France guy. He's been cheating for a year. So he's successful. You can write a bad policy and still be successful. But excellence requires you to say, I'm not comfortable. I think we can take another step. And that's what you share with those men and women. You constantly remind them that their pursuit of purpose. You constantly remind them we're pursuing excellence in everything that we do. And sometimes we mess up. Sometimes we skin our knees. Sometimes we fail. We say, okay, let's get back up. Let's keep going. Again, I'm not talking about failing tactically. Sometimes we do. Nobody gets hurt. That's why, right? You guys know, hey, after every operation, you sit back and go, hey, dude.
That was close.
But, hey, with all the training I had, we're lucky. And that's why you train and train and train when it comes to that. But in an environment where there's people, there's management, there's leadership. People, like I said earlier, there's a lot of great posters and stuff. You, as a leader, have to be a good manager. Management means you're utilizing resources and equipment well, or you have the ability to do that well. Grace Potter was a Navy admiral. She was an engineer, helped build some of the big carriers, I believe, or submarines. But Admiral Potter would say, you manage things, but you lead people, which I think is just so damn cool. You manage things. You manage a crime scene. You manage paperwork and files, but you lead people.
But so many poor leaders think you can apply the management to people, and that's where I think a lot of their failure starts.
Yeah,
they try to manage the person by going policy U equals nothing.
Yeah, well, yeah. I know where you're going. So, those things are important. And so that's why I said, when people ask, well, Jimmy, where do you start? I said, you start with what's your expectation? And what can you guys and gals expect from me? By the way, what does my agency expect? What does our agency expect? And here's what I expect from you. Here's what you can expect from me. Do you know some of the polls that are out there? It's amazing, man. Gallup does a great job. Polled, 70% of the people don't really fully understand what their bosses expect of them. I go, how can you not know that? How can you reach your mission if you don't know that? Yeah. So you got these people walking around and say, I don't really know what's going on, but I'm coming to work every day. Yeah. The hell? So that's
blindly
what I'm
walking.
talking about. Listen, that's why I tell people, what comes out of your mouth is important. What do you want to leave behind? Don't you want to leave it a little bit better? We only have X amount of breaths, man. Yeah. What are we doing in the time that the good Lord's given us in these positions? So go back to what you said. It isn't complicated, but it's not easy either.
Yeah. What do you got, Mark?
So good. Also good. I want to talk about and start transitioning into the books that you've written and stuff, and then go through a little bit of your credibility, and then what led you to write your first book, Leadership on the Front Lines. And then something that also you keep bringing up, which I love, is that a lot of people we don't talk about, or I don't think we ever hear, but personally and professionally, right? That's something that you've talked a lot about. I think a lot of guys, when we're in work world, we only think about the professional level. How's this person operating here? But how does that person operating personally? You know, that's a whole vulnerable situation that you start to get into, which a lot of people are scared of. So your timeline of your credibility, your service time into the DEA, which led you into your first book, and then your second book of Raising Courageous Children. So just give us a time lap on that.
You mean my third book?
Third book.
Thank you, missed the second one.
Sorry.
Fucking asshole.
So
Sorry.
In my career, like I said earlier, a lot has to do with our faith, how I was raised, and everything else. Went into the military, barely got out of high school, did not understand. I knew that I knew I was made for something. I just didn't really fully appreciate it. Became a Navy corpsman, a medic. Went into the Navy at 18, did a tour, got out, went to college, knew I wanted to go to college, started, what is it that I want to do? And I knew that whole idea of helping people was that pull for me. That was something, to be honest with you, that the whole idea of being like Captain America, I used to talk about, that's before Captain America. Is this popular today? Back then, I'm going to be like Captain America. That's what I want to be. And then went to Navy Reserves, switched over to the Air Guard, was an air crew on a C-130 as a medic. Met my wife the first day of school, asked her to marry me 3 months later. And then when we got married, transferred down to a college in Poughkeepsie. I was in an ROTC unit, became a military intelligence officer, but always wanted to be in law enforcement. And applied to DEA, and I was waiting. And I got called to a little department, and then right before I was supposed to start the department on Christmas Eve, DEA called, and boom, we took off. Credibility-wise is having the ability to walk through those situations. I said that before. As I tell people, I'm not a theoretician. I'm a practitioner. I've made the mistakes. I know what works. I know it works because I've applied those things. I've applied those things of caring about people, and it works. You change people's attitudes. Not all of them. Not all of them. I had to learn. I thought I was supposed to fix people. So if you were, a crappy worker in my group, I'm going to fix you. And I learned. It took me a little while to understand that. I can't fix you. I can't put in you what wasn't there in the first place. Think about that. If your whole idea of pursuing excellence, I can tell you about that all day long. And what I'm hoping to do is spark something that's in people, that the reason they're in this career is you want to look at somebody and go, that guy, that gal has got the same level of excitement that I do. You want to see that. You want to spark that. But there are people who aren't. So I'm not there. I had to learn that. And it took me a real kick in the crotch to realize I'm not there to fix people. And so credibility, you get back to credibility. So you walk those walks and you realize what works. You said what's, professional and personal. Personal is Johnny's not coming into, all of a sudden one of your workers is like coming in late all the time. And so the first thing, when you think of in old, I call it archaic leadership, is, hey, you SOB, I'm going to chop your head off next time you're not here in my office by 9:01 and saying, hey, got a minute? What's going on? I mean, hey, you're coming at what's going on. Guy looks at you, gal looks at you, goes, boss, we lost our daycare, and I got to take, Susie from here to here. I can't use it in my G-Ride, so I got to get my personal car. Okay, hey, we can, what? Let me help you out. Here's what I do. I'll lift and shift, because we have the authority to do that. What if I lift and shift your work hours? I give you a little time on this end, you give you a little time on that end. That's what I'm talking about.
But that's not in policy.
Well, it's sometimes it's not, and there's been a few times in my career, to be honest with you, that I just did it.
Right.
You just did it, and then you got to be willing to go, hey, if somebody finds out, that this just waited, hey, that's not written there. I don't care, but that's not going to go away. So what are we going to do? What are we going to leave the kid on a stoop? The hell's wrong with you? Or, that man or woman who's coming to work every day, they tell you their husband or wife's been diagnosed with whatever. Okay, let's try to mitigate. You sometimes can't, but how can I mitigate those things? What's my responsibility? Is my responsibility just to go, no, your problem. You got to be here 8 hours a day. Now, conversely, and I'll get back to the book, every time there's a new guy that came into the group or gal, I'd sit down with him, I'd tell him, who I am. I'd brag about my family. These are the things that are important to me, blah, 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 this, and that. Here's my expectations. Here's what our agency's expectations are. So this cat comes into our group. About a month later, he says, would you mind if I left a little, he's a brand new guy. I think he was prior military, prior law enforcement. My son has got his first soccer game, blah, blah, blah. Would you mind if I left a little earlier? Yeah, because tomorrow we could be humping 24 hours a day. And DEA, that's what you have. Your standard work day is a 10-hour day, but you can be out in the street 24 hours 7, and you're just doing it for the flag. There is no overtime. You call it AUO. So I said, yeah, no problem. So a few weeks later, I noticed he's missing Friday afternoon again. Then another Friday afternoon, I call him and I say, hey, dude, what's with you? You're leaving by 2 o'clock every Friday. He bows up on me right away. He literally bows up. Well, you told me how important your family was, and blah, 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 this, that, and the other thing. And so I'm coaching my son's soccer team every Friday, so I have to leave early. Well, I went freaking batshit and said some things that there's not in any leadership book that you're supposed to say. I didn't know you could get time off. Idiot. I didn't know you could get time off for swearing at people. So honestly, you go, are you kidding me? So then I got to walk with him and say, let me explain to you what I expect. Let me tell you what the agency expects. And no, you can't do that, right? Yeah. So guys, I call them a shoe salesman. Those guys are shoe salesmen. They shouldn't be carrying my badge. And if we're in a corporation, they shouldn't be part of the sales team, or they shouldn't be part of the widget team, whatever. But they're here. So guess what? You're now, you become a task-oriented person. Here's what I need you to do. Unless you prove to me otherwise. But here's a brand new guy who just figures, okay, I'm going to take it. Baggage Factor, the book. How'd you get to your book? I had about 25 pages in my career, starting about when I started being a senior agent. If I saw you do something neat, and I really, because I would have volumes if I saw you do something stupid. If I saw you do something, I'd write it down. I'd write it somewhere. I just always had I'd write it somewhere. I'd go somewhere, write something. Or if I situation, I would write about it. And the older I got, the more I climbed, I would start writing about stuff. Never knew where I was going to go with it. And then when my wife said, you should write a book, I pulled the stuff out and I don't even know where to start. And I'm a left to right guy. And so the first book, Leadership at the Frontline, I started putting together, and it's all my walk. It's the good, the bad, and the ugly. It was fun to do. It was mistakes that I made. It was the good things that you saw happen. And it's an honest, brief look, at really being a leadership practitioner in DEA. It was a lot of fun to do and write. And, we self-published it and everything. I got a call the other day. It's funny because it's been years since it came out in 2014. I got a call the other day. It's from a guy who's a chief or assistant chief out in the Northwest, and he found it in the FBI National Academy library somewhere. I go, the FBI National Academy? I should feel blessed to my FBI friend. So I wound up connecting with him and everything, and it's good. It is an honest. I call it a plane ride, a short plane ride. That's how short it is, but it speaks to the point. But I also talk about my weave in all the stuff I've done. I've tried to weave in my faith, talk about my family, my kids in there as well, as many of them are pursuing public service. So that was the first book. The second book, The Eagle and the Seagulls, I call it a wisdom story. When the kids were growing up, I would make up stories at night. A lot of times, and you guys know, it's hard, man, when you're working the street. I tell my wife sometimes I would leave and I wouldn't come home for a week. This is before all the pagers and all the other stuff. And get to a payphone and say, hey, I'm not coming home. So go bags back then are just as important that they are today. And but when you try your best, and this is what I talk about, personal and professional. We talk about when I would talk to a guy that I would see spend a lot of time at work, like I did, I would say, dude, you need to get home, take some time off, go see your family. And I was one guy, was a terrific guy. He said, no, boss, I want to be the best agent I could be. I go, I want you to be the best agent I could be too. I said, but you just had a baby. See, so now I know what's going on because I ask guys this, how's your family? Just had a baby. He had a baby. You need to go home. I said, because if you come and see me in a couple of months and tell me your marriage is falling apart, I said, I'm going to punch you in the face. I'm not joking. That's not in a leadership book anywhere. I tell him I'm going to punch you in the face. And a month and a half later, he comes in, boss, I really need some time off. I said, you son, it's not how you start counseling. You son of a, I told you. I said, okay, take all the time you need. It is fine. They were fine. But that's what I mean about professional. That's what I mean about personal. Do you know what's happened in somebody's in family? And that's if somebody lets you in, right? Because there are times people don't want you to know.
Yeah, pound sand. We don't want you to
I don't want you, and you got to respect that. Okay, fine. But there's nothing wrong with it. So the first book. The second book, getting back to that whole full circle, is time spent with kids at night. I'd make up these stories, and Eagle and Seagull. The premise of the story is I would tell them that you're called and born to be set apart, not to be morally arrogant or high above anybody, but you're called for a purpose, and you have a great purpose. You were made for a purpose. You were born for a purpose, and you have a purpose in this life, no matter how long or how short you have. And you're called to be set apart than everybody else. And so the eagle and the seagull, it's kind of this metaphorical look at this eagle who he gets to know these creatures on the cliff who are undisciplined and stuff, and how he stays away from it. And it's about storms in your life. We all have storms in our life, and what do we do? How do we go through those storms? So my brother-in-law, who's a pastor, used it actually to things happen, man. God's good, man. He used it to teach an adult class. And then the third book that we put out a few years ago, I think 2017, one of my sons walked up to me and said, "What's wrong with my generation?" That's a heavy question, man. Dad, what's wrong with my generation? And he's in public service and everything. And I kind of sat and just kind of honest conversation about this is what we're seeing in our culture today. We're breakdown of families, this, that, and the other thing. And so I went to my wife. I said, what would you think if we wrote about our walk? And the first thing she said, don't tell people how to raise families. No, it's not about how to raise families. You have 6 kids. They're all doing great. Some of them had some major failures. They survived. They've married up great. Men and women who are equally yoked. I said, what if we just told our story and just said, what did it take to raise men and women of courage in a culture that's devoid of moral values? And so she said, let's do it. And so we did. She co-authored it with me, and it's been great. Got a lot of great reviews. Really some cool stuff, but it's been a walk.
You've got 2 more coming out?
We have 3 more. So there's a series coming out called The Amazing Bedtime Adventures. And it's another, I use my grandchildren now are the stars in it. And these are stories I made up for the kids when they were younger. And the premise of it is they're visiting grandma and grandpa, and 2 at a time. And before they go to bed at night, they get into this little wagon and they want to play, and that wagon turns into something magical, and it takes them to places around the world. And it's just using kids' imagination to have fun with. And so we just, the first one is almost done. We got a great new company that we're going with. The illustrations are great, and we're hoping that'll be out in a series by fall. I was hoping to be out sooner, but I think by Christmas, it'll all be out. So you wouldn't know it. One of my passions is about writing, but I'm not a novel guy. I can't do a novel. But if I see something, and if you follow me,
I have trouble reading the highlights at the dentist office.
But I like to, if I see a situation or I see something that's on my heart, I'll sit and I'll write about it and I'll post it and stuff. But people say, oh, you got to post every day. I said, can't. I got to, it's stuff I gotta, that's on my heart. So,
so where can people? So first off, while we're on the books, where can people buy them?
So they're on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. There are ebooks that you can go. You go to the Lulu website. You go. I don't sell them from home since they're all online. They're easy to get. I forget. You can get most of them. You can get, and still you might be able to get them in hard copies. But a lot of people just go with the paperbacks. And they go from anywhere from $12 to, I saw some of the freaking hard copies were like $20-something. So, go online, go to, Amazon and just plug in James Capra author, and they should all come up, or Michelle Capra, and they'll come up. So, I got to plug my wife. kind of forgot about that.
And if people want to book you for leadership speaking,
Yeah,
and stuff
I'm
like
easy
that,
to find too. James L. Capra on the website. Used to be you had to go through all the marijuana guys who hated me. But that's become less and less since I retired. But go to the website. It's frontlineleadershipgroup.com. You can get a hold of me through the web website. My cell phone is on there as well, so you can call. COVID is impacted. We had a bunch of stuff lined up. I'm thankful and we're blessed. I have a retirement. My wife's got a great job, but we had a bunch of things lined up. COVID hit and we lost, like a lot of companies did, we lost a lot of gigs and stuff. So went back to writing, and we're just now getting some queries about traveling again. So I've had some great success about speaking about leadership issues. We've done some stuff about family issues. It's been a lot of fun. So they can get a hold of me through the website. You can call me, and if I don't get a hold of you right away, we'll be sure to get back to you within 24 hours. But
you're on Facebook and Instagram, right?
I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram, thanks to my daughter, who said I have to have an Instagram. But I'm not the best marketer. My wife is telling me that all the time. You know, I'm not. I think I give more books away than I sell, but it's important. That kind of stuff is kind of important to me to share the things that we learned and share kind of the wisdom that God's allowed us to have, and the experience. It gets back to Mark, what you were asking about, the credibility that you have, that it builds that. And then, you want, like I said, when I would leave places, I want the next guy or gal that took over to be better at this.
Yeah. Raising
my children, I want them to be better at parenting than I was. And then my wife would tell her the same thing. My parents, wanted their children to be better at doing the gig than they did. That's a thing that we hand down. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. You understand that you're fallible. So, but yeah, through the website, frontlineleadershipgroup.com, or any kind of leadership at the front line, my name, you should be easily find it.
Awesome. Mark, you got anything in closing, buddy?
Oh man, that was awesome.
Cool. Well, so we'll ask you the question that we ask all of our guests. It's the first time on the show. So if anybody's listened to us, they know the question we're going to ask, but obviously
I'm not single. I'm married. Go ahead.
In a world of commonality of individuals that are just common and just mediocre, right? What is your view of being uncommon today? What does that mean to you?
There's a couple of things that always come to mind when you talk about being uncommon. In Scripture, the Lord says, and He calls His people, He says, I call you to be sanctified. And sanctification means to be set apart, not to be morally aggregate, to be set apart, that people would look and say, what's different about them? Why do they pursue things with such excellence, with such passion? So when I think about uncommon, I think about men and women who are set apart when they pursue that purpose, that it's palpable, that when you see someone that's uncommon in that positive way, when you see that professional, semi-professional, that mom, that dad, that worker, that's uncommon, that it's palpable. It draws you in to go, what is different about that person? Because they're not settling. They're reaching up for how do I get better at it? I don't mean, when I say that they're not content with where they're at, I don't mean I'm not content in life, that I'm not content with my salary, that I'm not content with my family. I mean, in the pursuit of in my career as a military guy, the pursuit of my purpose was to be a 4.0 Strack sailor with a mission that I had to do as a medic. Same thing in the Air National Guard. As a military intelligence officer, I want to be the best military intelligence officer that I could be so we can accomplish the mission. And as a dad, and pursuing my purpose as a dad is to raise men and women of purpose who are courageous, who would stand against a culture that would tell them that their faith sucks, that would stand firm in that storm. That's when I think about uncommon, that's what I mean. These men and women are set apart. They're in the storm, they're in the arena, and they're fighting and they're pursuing their purpose, whatever that is in their lives. And to be uncommon is to understand that, to recognize that. That's why I'm here. I'm not like everybody else. I don't want to be like that person. I don't want to be. Maybe there is a person that I want to be like. Maybe there is that legacy man or woman that I go, that's a good example. Gets back to leadership. is that have I been a good example that others can say, I know what good leadership looks like, and I want to be better at it. Set apart, man, sanctified, not morally better, and part of it, to be, part of being uncommon is to pull people up. Say, come on, man, we're going, we're going in this direction. I think you said it. We don't settle for me. To be uncommon is not to settle for mediocrity. My God, not to settle for mediocrity. I'm just going to go do my thing every day. Run into so many people in my walk. Oh man, I'll do my 8 hours and I'm getting the hell out of here. I'm going to do my 20 and get the hell out of here. No passion, no purpose. I'm like, man, why do you exist? To be uncommon. That's so cool.
That's good. That's good. All right, guys. Well, you heard it best here on the Uncommon Line podcast. Check out his books. You can check them out. He told you where: Amazon, Barnes and Noble. My wife is telling me to do something right now. I'm supposed to hold these books up.
Here, I'll help you.
Books.
Pretty pictures.
We'll be posting them on the page this coming week and everything. Obviously, you'll have seen these. And I think we're doing a giveaway, so we'll have that announced then too. So we'll have that already announced the winner before this drops. So, but guys, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, brother. Appreciate it.
Thank you for supporting everything. Guys, remember, stay safe, stay switched on, stay uncommon.